It was just past 0640 at Luke Air Force Base when the morning heat began to press against the concrete like a second skin. The training grounds buzzed with a rhythm that felt almost musical, shouted commands, metal clinks from rifle drills, and the steady hum of UAV maintenance in the hangars. Recruits jogged from formation to the range, boots scuffing in cadence, their uniforms crisp, sleeves tight, and in the background, almost blurred into the scenery, walked a woman in faded cargo pants and a sun-bleached gray tee. Elena Ward moved like part of the infrastructure. A canvas utility bag hung off her left shoulder, heavy with wrenches, lens cloths, and field tools. Her hair was tied back, not quite military neat, but tight enough to stay out of her way. She wore no rank insignia, no patches, just a clipped badge on her belt that read, "Logistics Support." Most people barely noticed her. When they did, it was with the sort of glance one gives a maintenance panel or a traffic cone useful, but forgettable. At 0710, she stepped past the sniper prep course on the East Range, heading toward the Armory Annex. Recruits were hunched over workbenches there, practicing field strip and reassembly of M4 carbines. A few paused, watching her pass. One, a tall airman with buzzed hair and mirrored sunglasses, nudged his friend and pointed to the inside of her wrist. A silver tattoo, faint and geometric, caught the sunlight as she reached for her water bottle. "What kind of tattoo is that?" "Looks like a barcode for bananas." His laugh was loud enough for the others to hear. One more joined in, grinning. "Maybe it rings up 2 for $1. She heard it. That much was clear. But Elena didn't react. Her gaze stayed on the tools inside her pouch, methodically checking a torque driver and calibration cloth. She adjusted her route by a single step, enough to skirt past them, and disappeared behind a building without saying a word. Inside the maintenance bay, a young tech was struggling with a stripped bolt on a sensor rack pulled from an MQ-9 Reaper. Elena approached quietly. The tech stepped aside without question. She crouched, examined the panel, pulled a precision wrench from her pouch, and twisted the stuck bolt free in under a minute. She didn't explain what she'd done. She didn't wait to be thanked. By 0722, she was gone again, walking toward a parts storage shed behind the motor pool. By 08:00, the range was in full swing. Instructors barked corrections, the crack of rifles filled the air, and brass casings bounced off the concrete pads. Somewhere in the mess of voices and sweat, someone joked again about the logistics lady with the fruit sticker. The story was spreading, casually, like soldiers do when boredom meets novelty. But no one stopped to ask her name. That was the rhythm Elena lived in. She was always a few seconds ahead of whatever needed fixing. She topped off water tanks before someone asked. She realigned broken mounts before the crew chiefs realized they were out of tolerance. She was the quiet part of the base that worked, even when no one looked at it. She'd been on site for 6 months. Most assumed she was part-time. Others thought she rotated from another base. No one asked. No one needed to. But Cole. Ethan Riley had started noticing her, not for the jokes or the tools she carried, but for how she carried herself. Her posture was always balanced. Her steps were quiet but firm. And during a briefing 2 weeks earlier, she'd entered the room, scanned it in under 3 seconds, and sat at the back corner facing the door, with no one behind her. He hadn't said anything then. Most wouldn't have noticed. But Riley had deployed more than a dozen times. He'd seen war up close and trained with people who knew how to survive it. That kind of quiet didn't come from shyness. It came from training. It came from surviving things that had no place on a clipboard. At 08:30, a UAV pre-flight crew found their diagnostic screen frozen. Elena happened to walk by. They asked for IT. She just nodded, popped the panel open, and bypassed a faulted connection to the control bus. It rebooted in 20 seconds. One of them asked how she knew to do that. She replied without looking up. Just experience. That's all. Then she was gone again, swallowed by the movement of the day. Recruits kept mocking her tattoo. Sergeants kept barking drills. But somewhere, in the background, Elena Ward kept everything running, and no one really knew who she was. By 09:15, the heat had thickened to a shimmer over the tarmac, and the UAV maintenance bay pulsed with heat and static. Techs in coveralls moved between rolling ladders and diagnostic carts, trying to prep a MQ-9 Reaper for afternoon recon sim. The flight stabilizer module was acting up again. Nothing catastrophic, just enough drift to flag an alert. Two techs leaned over the right wing, one holding a checklist, the other squinting at the wiring. Elena stepped into view without a word. No one had called her, but she must have seen the blinking yellow status on the shared ops screen inside the bay. She climbed onto the small platform beside the port wing, set down her pouch, and peeled off a pair of thin gloves. "We already pulled the main bus." One tech offered, stepping aside. She didn't answer. Her fingers moved confidently across the stabilizer housing. She detached a panel, revealing the pitch sensor array, and tapped twice at the vibration coupler before pulling it. From her pouch, she pulled a new sensor, but not standard issue. It was a hardened field version, usually reserved for deployed aircraft. She installed it with fast, compact movements, no wasted energy, no hesitation. The system hummed, recalibrated, and cleared its warning, all within 3 minutes. The lead tech blinked. "Where'd you even get that sensor?" Elena tilted her head slightly, as if the question had nothing to do with her. Just had it on hand. By 10:10, she was walking past the outdoor range where a group of recruits were zeroing optics on their M4s. The sun had crept high enough to bleach everything pale, and the air smelled of hot brass and CLP oil. One of the rifles jammed on its second shot. The shooter, a frustrated young airman, slammed the bolt forward and grumbled something about the ACOG mount being off. Elena crouched beside the table and offered her hand. He looked at her like she was holding a mop, not a scope. But he handed it over. She clicked through the adjustments on the Trigicon ACOG, eyeing windage and elevation, and without pausing, made 3 micro-adjustments. Her movements weren't guesswork. They were deliberate, practiced, precise. In under 30 seconds, she handed the rifle back. The airman gave a lopsided shrug. Lucky guess? She didn't correct him. She just stood and left, disappearing toward the admin block. Lieutenant Spencer Knox watched the entire thing from the tower, fresh from officer training school. Knox prided himself on knowing chain of command and recognizing every functional role on base. Elena didn't fit. She walked like she belonged, but didn't follow any military standard. She fixed equipment without being asked. She accessed places without being cleared, and she didn't talk much. Later, at 11:25, Knox caught her outside the Armory Annex. A training M4 had been dropped by a recruit and the buffer tube was cracked. A proper fix would have involved returning it to the weapons shop, logging it into inventory, waiting on a part requisition. But Elena was already on one knee beside the rifle. She examined the stock, rolled it gently, and pulled a multi-tool from her pouch. She stripped the lower receiver, swapped the buffer tube, and tested the recoil spring all in less than 2 minutes. She tightened the replacement with just enough torque to avoid thread wear and checked alignment with a glance. Knox watched, baffled. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked, arms crossed. Elena stood slowly, brushing dust from her knee. Her answer was quiet. "Logistics gets us into strange places, sir." Knox frowned. That wasn't standard. Logistics didn't fix combat rifles like armorers. Logistics didn't carry reinforced buffer tubes in field packs. Logistics didn't know how to move through a hangar without tripping a single alert zone. She nodded at him and walked off toward the back lot. He said nothing, but the crease between his brows deepened. By noon, the story of the ACOG scope had started circulating. Some laughed, others dismissed it. But those who'd watched her hands work began to feel something else. Not suspicion exactly. Not yet, but something quieter, like someone realizing the shape in their peripheral vision wasn't what they thought it was. She had shown no pride, no arrogance, only that strange, efficient calm. The kind of calm that didn't come from training manuals. It came from experience, under pressure, from doing the job because lives depended on it, not because someone was watching. And still, no one knew her first name. No one knew where she'd come from. But the equipment she touched never broke again. The systems she adjusted stayed tuned. And when things went sideways, she was already moving. Some started calling her the ghost in cargo pants. No one said it to her face, but they said it when she passed, when she ducked into a room, fixed something, and vanished before anyone could log the request, a whisper of presence, and that whisper was starting to get louder. Cole. Ethan Riley had seen enough over the years to trust his instincts. You learn to watch for the small things. The shift in posture when someone walks into a room. The way certain people always glance at exits. Not out of paranoia, but pattern. Elena Ward had that pattern. Every time she stepped into a briefing room or maintenance hangar, she scanned the space. Not a nervous flick of the eyes. A methodical sweep, like she was mapping angles, counting faces. He first noticed it during a logistics sync meeting at 13:00 on a Wednesday. She entered late, walked the perimeter, and chose the only chair with a full view of the room and clear line to the door. It wasn't accidental. No one taught that in orientation. That was muscle memory. For weeks. He'd watched her blend in like part of the paint. Always quiet. Always useful. But the way she moved didn't belong to support staff. It belonged to someone who expected trouble and was ready when it came. At first, he tried to explain it away. Maybe she'd done security rotations, maybe some field support with a fast unit. But that didn't hold. Too many small signs. At 17:40 that same day, he sat down in his office and pulled her file from the base personnel directory. It opened with her photo, badge number, and role logistics support technician, non-uniformed contractor. But the rest of it was thin. Too thin. Her employment start date was listed, but there was no history, no previous assignment, no base of origin, no security clearance details, just a line that read, classified by JSOC Directive 479. Access restricted. That wasn't normal, not for a civilian tech. He flagged a T for a deeper look. A senior systems analyst named Wallace ran a basic trace. Nothing. He tried to backtrack her email metadata, internal task logs, anything. Most had routing headers from generic support queues. All too clean. Then Wallace tried one more thing. He fed her ID photo into the internal facial recognition tool used for restricted access tracking. At 17:59, the screen locked. The system paused, blinked once, and displayed in red subject matched to Omega class designation. Access suspended. Report to level 7. Clearance officer. The room went still. Wallace leaned back, eyes wide. That alert wasn't just rare. It was supposed to be dormant. Riley leaned forward, his voice low. Screenshot that. Now disconnect. Wallace complied without question. Riley left the office, walked out into the dusk, and headed straight for the classified records archive housed in the old secure wing. Most officers avoided it. Too much red tape. Too many ghosts. But Riley had a few favors left from deployments long past. He used one of them. Inside a climate-controlled room at 18:30, he pulled a sealed binder from the Afghanistan conflict archives. It was stamped JSOC Eyes Only. Inside was a partial mission log from Nuristan Province, 2009. One photo, blurred and long-range, showed a sniper in overwatch above a canyon wall. Face obscured. Rifle unmistakable, a Barrett M82. But what caught Riley was the faint shimmer on the shooter's wrist. A tattoo, geometric, barely visible, but identical to Elena's. He cross-checked the file code Omega 13. The rest was blacked out. No operation name, no casualty report, no commander listed. Only one word at the bottom of the page, erased. He sat back in the cold quiet. Elena wasn't logistics. She wasn't even civilian, not in the way most people use the word. She was something else. Something built for missions no one got medals for. Something meant to disappear. Riley returned to base close to 1945. He passed the quad where recruits were finishing chow, their laughter rising in the cooling air. Somewhere behind a row of buildings, he caught a glimpse of her silhouette, moving alone, checking an equipment list. The same slow, practiced pace. Like a ghost, no one was supposed to notice. The weight of it settled over him. He'd heard rumors in Kandahar, stories passed around at fobs late at night. A black group, no name, no uniforms, called in only when everything else failed, the kind of unit that didn't officially exist. He walked to his quarters without a word. The next morning, he made one more call. A retired intel officer, now living in North Carolina. The man didn't answer at first, then picked up with a tired voice. Riley didn't waste time. "What do you know about Omega-class designations?" The pause was too long. "You still in uniform?" "Yes." "Then stop asking." "I'm not guessing. I saw it in person." "Then let it go." "She's on my base." That line went silent. Then came a slow response. "If she's still walking around, it's not your job to know why. People like that, they were never meant to be seen twice." The call ended. Riley sat there for a long time, watching the sunrise break over the hangars. He didn't know what Elena Ward had done. But whatever it was, someone had erased her from the books and hoped no one would ask. And now, she was back, fixing rifles and water pumps like none of it had ever happened. The light inside the secure records vault was tinted green from aging bulbs, buzzing faintly as if reluctant to help. It was 21:10 when Lot de Colon and Riley sat alone at the steel desk, surrounded by sealed document sleeves and redacted history. He flipped through another folder marked "Restricted," fingers careful not to tear the aged corners. After 45 minutes of dead ends, he found it. Inside the dusty manila envelope was a black and white surveillance photo dated 2009. It was grainy and taken at distance, but clear enough to see what mattered. A lone sniper lay prone along a ridge in Nuristan, Afghanistan. Half her face was hidden under a scarf, her goggles reflecting sunlight. But her rifle, a Barrett M82A1 with customized grip tape, was unmistakable. What caught Riley, though, wasn't the weapon. It was the wrist, just visible outside the sleeve. A glint of silver ink in a geometric shape, the exact same tattoo that had lit up the facial recognition system. He stared at it for a long time. Then he flipped the sheet. The back was marked Omega-13 Tier 0 Operative, JSOC attached, budget black, authorization undisclosed. There were no unit insignias, no commander names, no mission title, no kills confirmed or denied. Only a timestamp 22:47:14 NOV 09. The legend lived between the lines, and right there, Elena's wrist was frozen in shadowed light, caught in the act of being someone she was never meant to be known as. Riley left the vault and made one call. He used a direct line to a retired colonel named Marcus Harlan, a man who had once overseen irregular warfare detachments out of Bagram. Harlan didn't pick up on the first ring. He answered on the second, his voice low and graveled. "It's Riley. I need to ask about something from 09, Omega-13. There was a pause. Then the line clicked as if he'd sat up straighter. "Where'd you hear that?" "I saw her. She's here, on my base, working logistics." Another pause, longer this time. Harlan's voice was tight. "Son, if you're seeing Omega-13, either something's gone very wrong, or she's trying to disappear. She's fixing rifles, UAVs. She walks like a shooter, reads rooms like a field operator. The tattoo matched a file from Nuristan." Harlan exhaled slowly. "I can't tell you what she did. Not because I'm not allowed, but because I only ever heard whispers. We lost an entire recon team in the Kunar corridor, ambushed and outnumbered. They said the sniper support showed up without comms, without backup, and cleared the path single-handed. No one saw her leave. The only name passed around was Quiet Kill. That wasn't in the after-action report, because there wasn't one. What was Omega-13? Black Unit. Tier 0. Designed for operations that didn't exist. Target extractions. Hostage rescues behind unfriendly lines. Kills that couldn't be linked to a flag. JSOC owned the protocol, but they kept the names even from CENTCOM. Once the job was done, the operators got scrubbed. No pensions, no medals, just deletion. Riley leaned back in his chair. His hand was shaking slightly. They called her Quiet Kill. Harlan's voice lowered. I saw a file once. Mission was marked Suicide Risk 100%. She volunteered. That's all I'll say. If she's walking around your base, pretend she's not there. Let her disappear again. After the call, Riley sat in silence. He stared at the glowing cursor on his encrypted laptop, blinking like a heartbeat. He opened the personnel directory again. Elena Ward's file stared back, still marked classified, still void of history, but now it was filled with everything he knew in his gut. The woman sweeping through hangars, fixing stabilizers and torque clamps had once carried out kills from over a mile away. She had stood on cliffs above hostile valleys, alone, unseen, breathing like a ghost in the dirt, and the government she served had scrubbed her clean. At 22:15, he stepped outside. The air had cooled. Floodlights glowed across the base, casting long shadows between buildings. Down at the motor pool, he spotted her walking back to the parts bay, a clipboard in one hand, flashlight beam steady on the asphalt. She paused at a door and glanced behind her, not nervously, just out of habit. She stepped inside and disappeared. Riley exhaled. He'd confirmed it. The whispers, the photo, the tattoo. She was Omega-13. She was Quiet Kill. She was someone who wasn't supposed to be remembered. But here she was, fixing what others broke, blending into a world that never knew she'd saved it. And for reasons he couldn't name, he didn't file a report. He didn't alert command. He just stood there a little longer, watching the building she had vanished into, and whispered the only thing that made sense. Thank you. It was 14:05 when Elena stepped onto the sniper qualification range, clipboard tucked beneath one arm, small case of tools in the other. The Arizona sun hung heavy, baking the concrete observation deck and stretching shadows from the tower to the target lanes. On the line. 2010. Enhanced sniper rifles sat on benches, their operators standing nearby, adjusting slings and spotting scopes. These were the best marksmen from 3 units, each scheduled for final qualification that week. She moved with quiet purpose, stepping behind one rifle laid open for inspection. The bolt was pulled back. The shooter, a lean specialist barely out of basic, had been complaining about drift on the optic. Elena set her case on the bench, opened it with one hand, and pulled out a soft cloth and calibration tool. Without a word, she began adjusting the scope. The specialist chuckled to himself and waved over a buddy. Check it out. Logistics lady's playing sniper. Maybe she brought a coupon for that scope too. Another laughed. What's that tattoo barcode for batteries? Elena didn't flinch. Her hand kept steady on the elevation knob. She made 2 careful clicks, paused, then adjusted windage. Her eyes never left the glass. Her fingers moved like they'd done this 100 times before, under stress, in dust, with minutes between success and death. A captain standing nearby turned at the noise. He approached, frowning. Ma'am, this area is restricted to qualified personnel. Please step away from the weapon. Elena straightened. She met his eyes, calm but direct, and gently stepped back from the rifle. Sir, the scope was drifting low right. It's now set for 500 yards, adjusted for wind from 2 o'clock. Confirm 0 on round 1. The specialist hesitated, then settled behind the rifle, eye to glass. The shot cracked out across the range. A tight, clean hit rang back from the steel plate. He blinked. Center mass. Before the captain could respond, A black SUV pulled up along the far fence. The door opened, and Colonel Michael Granger stepped out. His pace was slow, deliberate, the kind of walk that made people straighten their backs without realizing it. He scanned the line and froze. His eyes locked on Elena. She was still standing beside the bench, the afternoon sun catching the faint shimmer of the silver tattoo on her wrist as she closed her tool case. Granger's expression changed. Not confusion, not curiosity, recognition, then disbelief. He walked forward, each step slower than the last. At 5 meters, he stopped. That symbol? Where did you get it? Elena didn't blink. Her tone was even quiet. I'm logistics support, sir. Granger didn't move. For a long moment, the range went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then he stepped closer, voice lower. Are you Omega-13? She didn't confirm, didn't deny. Her hands remained at her sides, her eyes fixed ahead. I maintain equipment, Colonel. His face paled. He turned toward the line of soldiers and officers now watching the scene unfold, unsure of what they were seeing. His voice dropped to a hard edge. From this moment forward, no one here speaks of this. No notes, no photos, no mention. Anyone who violates that will answer directly to me. The air shifted. Jokes turned to stillness. The captain beside Elena straightened, suddenly unsure whether to salute or stay silent. The specialist who'd mocked her didn't speak. He simply stared at the rifle like it might tell him what just happened. Granger leaned in one last time, this time almost to himself. I heard stories, missions that never existed, whole squads rescued, no comms, no backup, just one sniper. He stepped back, nodded once, and walked away. Elena watched him go, then turned toward the rifle bench and quietly collected the last of her tools. As she walked off the range, no one said a word. No one dared. From that afternoon on, her presence no longer drew laughter, only quiet, and the occasional sideways glance filled not with mockery, but something closer to awe. The office was quiet by 2045, the kind of quiet that doesn't just mean silence, but stillness. Elena sat alone at the back table, her elbows resting near a dismantled scope. A clean cloth folded beneath her hand. The lights were dimmed except for a small desk lamp, casting a pool of warm light over her tools. Outside, the bass had gone into its night rhythm. Boots on gravel softened, radios clicked at low volume, and metal doors echoed less often. She wasn't cleaning tonight. Not really. The scope in front of her had already been serviced twice. She turned it in her hands slowly, more out of habit than need, letting her fingers move without thought. The office smelled like oil and sun-baked metal. It was familiar, steady, and, for now, hers. There had been no confrontation after what happened on the range, no reprimand, no follow-up, just silence, the kind that meant people had seen too much and decided not to ask more. That was fine. She had never come here to be known. At 21:03, a quiet sound slid under the door, just a rustle of paper on tile. She looked up, then stood, a single sheet of lined paper, folded in half. No name, no envelope. She picked it up and opened it without expectation. Some of us remember Nuristan. You saved more lives than you'll ever know. One of them was my brother. Thank you. There was no signature, but it didn't need one. She read it again. Her fingers held the paper gently, like it might vanish if gripped too tightly. She folded it, then unfolded it, just once more. Then she set it on the desk and sat back down. Her eyes lingered on the surface of the table, on the shape of the scope, on the shadows crawling toward the floor. There was a weight in the room, but it wasn't heavy. It was calm. It was what came after noise, after tension, after memory. She'd tried to bury this life, not from shame, but from the need to breathe. When the team had disbanded, when the files were sealed, she told herself that peace was something earned. She didn't want medals or stories. just the silence, just work that helped, even if no one noticed. But people remembered, even if they didn't say so until years later, even if it was just a note slipped under a door, in the dark, when no one else was watching. At 05:15 the next morning, her room was empty. The bunk was made with corners sharp enough to pass inspection. The footlocker was bare. No toiletries, no shoes, not even the black field pouch she'd carried for months. Just air and a faint trace of lemon-scented cleaner. Down in the logistics office, everything had been reset, labels reprinted, tools returned, inventory confirmed, nothing left out of place, nothing that would catch the eye. Except one thing. On the workbench, next to the scope she had polished the night before, sat a folded piece of paper. It was plain, unmarked. But beneath it, on the surface, a few careful words had been printed in ink that didn't smudge. "Don't judge by uniforms," Strength whispers. By 06:00 word had spread that she was gone. No one saw her leave. No one had clearance to track where she went next. But the message stayed. The handwriting wasn't dramatic. The phrasing wasn't loud. But everyone who walked past that scope read it. And everyone who read it understood more than they let on. She didn't take anything with her. But she left something behind. Dignity in silence. Power without need for recognition. A kind of strength that didn't come from rank, or ribbons, or even reputation. Just the steady, precise presence of someone who had already done more than she'd ever admit, and then disappeared, quietly, on her own terms. By the end of the week, her name wasn't spoken, but everyone at Luke Air Force Base knew who she was. Word traveled in whispers, passed between bunks and chow lines. No one dared say it too loud. There were no official announcements, no acknowledgement from command. But something had changed. The rifles she'd calibrated still held perfect zero. Recruits who had once chuckled during maintenance drills now checked their scopes twice, remembering the way she handled optics with fingers that moved like memory. No one moved her tools. The bench she used stayed, organized the way she left it. A few NCOs stopped by the logistics office just to stand for a moment, like it held something sacred. At 20 Urzamara one evening, 3 airmen sat in the barracks looking at a screen. One of them had tried digging into Omega Force through the training network. He scrolled through dead links, scrubbed archives, and redacted summaries until he found one official entry. All records sealed under executive directive, no access. He leaned back and whistled. That's all it said. Nothing more. The others didn't respond. They just stared at the screen. It confirmed what they'd all felt since that day on the sniper range. She wasn't just someone who slipped through the system. She'd been someone it was built to forget. Later, one of them, Airman Chavez, sat at his desk and wrote in a small green notebook. He didn't write often, but this time he did. I won't look at support staff the same way again. I used to think hero meant loud, medals, ribbons, speeches, but she didn't need any of that. She just fixed things, then left. And somehow I think that's more heroic than anything I've ever seen. Outside, base life kept moving. Aircraft cycled on the flight line. T-6 trainers came and went with students fresh off ground school. Recruits ran formations at 05:30 sharp. Supply trucks rolled in and out of the motor pool. But the mood was different now. People started saying please and thank you more often at the logistics window. Someone rewrote the maintenance rotation to include names instead of just ID tags. A new sign was hung above the tool rack in the armory equipment tells no lies. Take care of it like she did. Nobody said who she was. They didn't have to. Instructors who had once barked at junior techs began asking their opinions. A sergeant from Alpha Platoon brought coffee to the supply sergeant without being asked. A lieutenant who'd rolled his eyes during requisitions now stayed an extra 5 minutes to help carry crates. They weren't big changes, but they were the kind that stay. The folded paper she'd left under the scope stayed there too. Some said it was rotated out by supply. Others claimed someone in command sealed it in a clear pouch and pinned it to the inside of the tool locker. But the words never left. Don't judge by uniforms, Strength whispers. Colonel Granger never brought it up again. Neither did Colt Riley. But they both began showing up at inspections they used to delegate, and when they saw young officers dismiss the quiet ones, they paused, just long enough to correct them with a look. Elena Ward became a story, but not the kind told over drinks. More like a lesson, a name passed without being said, a presence remembered not because of rank, but because of how she moved through the world clean, quiet, and exact. Some said she was still on base somewhere. Others thought she had left in the middle of the night. No manifest listed her departure. No destination was logged. But her absence felt complete, like someone had closed a door gently behind them and left everything better than they found it. Weeks passed, but the legend stayed. A shadow beneath the surface of routine. A reminder that some people don't serve for recognition. They serve because it's all they know. Because someone has to make sure the scopes are clean, the bolts are aligned, and the silence between shots is ready when it matters most. She didn't leave a mark in the system, but she left one on every person who had ever underestimated a quiet hand or a steady voice, and that would last far longer than any file.